Hello again, fellow podcaster, and welcome back to Pod Theory. As always, I am your host, Jason Cercone, and today I'm going to answer the question, how many podcast episodes should you record before launching your show? Now, the easy answer is more than one. And that's an easy answer because you need to give yourself a cushion. You don't want to record a show, edit it, make it the highest quality and best show you can make it, release it, and then be scrambling to follow it up. Plus, you're going to want to do something huge as you launch your show, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Now, this is one of the big reasons I believe there are so many podcasts out there with just one episode uploaded. The producer was so excited to get their content out there, they didn't think about what came next. Now, if you say you're going to do a weekly show, then you don't, your consistency is killed from the start, and you'll lose audience members before you even gain them. Now, the number of shows you record before you launch your podcast is contingent on three things. Number one, is your content evergreen or is it current? Number two, how often will you release new shows? And number three, how many episodes will you release for your podcast launch? Now, in episode 13, I'm going to go into more detail about why you need to have a launch strategy for the debut of your podcast. And the number of episodes you have recorded will play into that. So, don't miss that episode right after this one. For now, let's look at the first question. Is your content evergreen or is it current? If it's evergreen, which means your content is built for the long term and can be discovered years down the road and still be useful, then batching out your episodes and recording several at a time before you launch is a smart move. If your content is more current and in the moment, batching is going to be impossible because you'll need to build your content based on current events unfolding. This can be done, but it's definitely more challenging. Understand going in that you'll need to stick to a strict recording schedule in order to release your show with consistency. Now, the second question, how often will you release new shows? And for the sake of this, let's assume you're building your content based on evergreen subject matter. If your podcast is going to be daily, I would not launch with any less than 30 episodes completed. Now, that may seem like a lot, and depending on the length of your show, it very well could be. But believe me, time will fly. And before you know it, it's going to catch up to you. All of your content will be published, and you're going to need to repeat the process all over again. Or you start scrambling and trying to do a show every day. And this may work at first, but eventually this will catch up to you too. Other priorities will take precedence, and your consistency will be shot. Now, the good news is, in most cases, a daily podcast is not long form and will allow you to create more episodes at a quicker pace. If you do have time for a daily long form podcast, more power to you. I know I don't. Always keep consistency in mind no matter what release schedule you're committing to. Now, for a weekly release, I'd have at least 10 episodes recorded before I launch. 10 weeks may seem like a long time, but it's really not. You'll want to have content prepared so while you make more content, you're continuing to build your bank of upcoming episodes in perpetuity. The last long-form podcast I did, I banked 15 episodes before I launched the show. And the reason why leads us into our third question. How many episodes will you release for your podcast launch? Now, there is no right or wrong answer to this question, but you absolutely want to have a launch for your podcast. Why? Because the world premiere of your podcast is a big friggin' deal. You want to celebrate that your show is live and give people an ample block of content right out of the gates to get them hooked. Now, this can be done in a number of different ways. First and foremost, advertise and tease the launch of your podcast for weeks leading up to the debut. Use this time to share brief clips from the show that you've already recorded, preview what people will hear, and get them excited for your debut. Now also, before we get into how to handle your launch, put together a brief introduction episode that you can post a couple weeks before you launch. Now, this episode can be just a few minutes long and set the table for what's to come, but it will get something active in your podcast host and allow you to set up access to directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Podchaser, etc., etc. And you can do all of this before you go live. This way, when your show does go live, people can access it wherever they're used to getting their podcasts. And in your teases leading up to your launch, you can point people to the various directories and get some early subscribers. Now, your launch. You've built it up for weeks. You're ready to go. You're ready to get your content out there. How do you want to release those shows? You can do it a number of ways, as I said before. You can release a number of them all at once in one big block on the first day. You can release one a day over the course of consecutive days. You can release 2 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, and so on for as many as you want to release up front. The idea is to get a nice chunk of content for people to binge and ultimately get hooked on your show. But it's your podcast. You can celebrate its release whatever way you deem appropriate. But, as you can tell, doing a big launch requires you to burn through a sizable chunk of your batched content. Now, if you're prepared with several episodes already produced and ready to publish after your launch, you're good to go, and you can focus your efforts on upcoming episodes going forward. But if you only record 5 episodes and use all 5 for your launch, what are you going to do next? Batching your content is a great habit for your efforts throughout the entire life of your podcast. It allows you to be proactive instead of reactive. It gives you time to make adjustments to your schedule when needed. And it doesn't leave you scrambling to put content together that may end up being below your standards because it's rushed. Batching helps you stay consistent. And that's what podcasting is all about. That's going to do it for this episode of Pod Theory. If you learned something today, please take 30 seconds to leave a rating and review for the show on your podcast platform of choice. Please and thank you. Good talk. I'll see you back here tomorrow. This has been Jason Cercone on Pod Theory.